I could not believe what I was seeing. I could have filled the back of his head with 5.56, which is an absolute joke.
Well, it's not an ape, because if the Sasquatch was an ape, we would already have one.
What are these elusive hominids that stalk the wilderness? Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, Williem Jevning. Welcome to the mystery. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. We have Randy with us today. Randy, I guess we'll just kind of start at the beginning. Tell us about the experiences you've had and sort of walk us into them, from the beginning. What were you doing and how did you get into that situation or situations?
Well, the recent one, that was August 15th, so it's just a couple of weeks ago. This was in Ohio, Salt Fork State Park. They have a yearly Bigfoot conference there, which my sons and I have been going to for 5 or 6 years now. It gives us a chance to get together. They're all scattered, Florida to Ohio, and I'm in Tennessee now, so we make a weekend out of it, just rent a cabin and hang out at the park, that kind of thing. This was Saturday. We spent the day more or less hiking and just hanging out at the park, that kind of thing, and the evening rolled around. We were getting ready to leave the next morning, and we decided to just drive the back roads. It's kind of rural there. So that's what we did, and we ended up on this one road. I'm actually not sure if it was within the boundaries of the park or not. If it wasn't, it was really close. It's kind of a dead-end road, ends up in a boggy, swampy type area, and we stayed there for 15, 20 minutes just basically listening, and decided to head back to the cabin. Well, it was still relatively light outside. My son was driving at the time, and he was moving at a very slow speed, almost an idle, 5 miles an hour, I'm going to guess. And he had his lights out. It was still plenty light enough to see. If you were going to drive, out on the road, you would legally have to run your headlights, but it was still plenty light. And we were almost out of this area, about a quarter mile or so from the hard road. And the road kind of made a slight turn, and then it was going up a grade. Well, as soon as we got around the curve far enough to where you could, see straight ahead, it couldn't have been no more than 100 feet in front of us on what was to us the left side of the road. This figure was standing there almost fully in the road. Its right leg was in the vegetation, but the left leg was on the road. You could plainly see it. I mean, it wasn't light enough to see facial features or anything like that. Just, it was arms, legs, torso, and a head, which seemed proportionately small for the body. But anyway, it was, the thing that struck me was its height. It was just so tall. I can't accurately give you a number, but no number would surprise me, But it was all but shocking. And we drove, this whole thing didn't last 5 seconds. And a couple seconds into it, my son reached down and hit his headlights, and it immediately moved to the right into the vegetation and down in a way that it's kind of hard for me to describe. I described it as melted away, or like the ground swallowed it up, and it was so quick that if you would have blinked your eyes, you would have thought it magically disappeared, just like poof, gone. My son said, "Where did it go?" And I was starting to tell him that it moved off the road, and I said, "Wait a minute." I said, you saw it too?" He said, yeah, and I said, "Okay." There was some vegetation kind of bent out into the road. This is a gravel dirt road, and it was, I don't know if it did it or it was just coincidentally it was standing right next to it. Said, show me where you saw it. So we get up to it, and he stops the car, and he says, right here. So I know he saw what I saw, and we had the windows down. It was a warm evening, and we listened for, a few seconds and didn't hear anything. And then I got spooked, and I said, man, you might want to get ready to accelerate. And he was on it. He had his window rolled up and just left, Well, that was about the extent of that, but I'm still struggling to verbalize this. I wish that I could somehow imprint on paper what I saw, but it was really big. I mean, the width wasn't as impressive to me as the height. The arms hung down to where I would assume the knees were, just a couple of feet off the ground. And that was it. It was black. I don't know if you have black bear where you're at, but it was similar in color to that. Very dark, real easy to pick out. It could have been nothing else, no tree trunk, no shadow, There was absolutely no mistake in my mind what I had seen. And the effect it had is I'm still working through that, but you see something like that and you want to get on the rooftops and yell, hey, everybody, this thing is real. It's not BS. But then you don't want to say nothing because you don't want anybody thinking you've lost your mind, So that's pretty much what it was, that particular instance.
Hey, Randy, I got a couple questions for you, and a great description that you had. And so you said that in proportion to its size, you thought the head was small, correct?
Yeah, and I don't know if that was the angle, because it was uphill from us. But, I kind of, for whatever reason, focused on center mass. After I initially saw it and my mind recognized it for what it was, again, I saw shoulders, head, arms, legs, that kind of thing. But then my eyes were drawn to the chest area, and about that time is when my son turned the headlights on. So I didn't have a lot of time, but I did see, the definition of what I would assume was the head. You know what I mean? It was a bump on the shoulders, but
yeah.
You would think it would be a lot larger than that. It reminded me of like a big football player with his helmet off, where he has his little peanut head. You know what I mean? Is what it kind of looked like.
Yeah, right. And you said the color was black?
Yeah, it stood out. The contrast was definite. It was, there was nothing else around it even close to the color. It stood out. It was so easy to see. And, again, there was just no mistake at all. Yeah, from what I could tell, it was black.
What was the time of day when this happened?
It was, I'm going to say, around 8:15, 8 to 8:15, right in there somewhere. Because by the time we got up to the hard road, again, you have to use your lights and back to the cabin. It was fully dark, and that was probably another 10-minute ride, 15-minute ride maybe, something like that.
So it would have been kind of dusk or twilight?
Yeah, I would say the sun, had set, but there was still, again, plenty of light to see,
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, and you said this is August 15th, so, I'm just kind of in my mind doing some quick calculations. August 15th here, latitude isn't that different from where I'm located, and so, yeah,
okay.
The sun goes down, you still have a good hour and a half of, you can see light in the sky, hour and a half later.
Right.
Although, it's going to be dark, but yeah. So, and what I really found interesting was the speed at which it crossed the road. And that is what we hear time. I mean, it's just iconic.
Right, right. Well, I didn't actually see it cross the entire road. Looking at it, it was on the left side of the road, so it moved to its right, our left, and that went downhill there. And so it just kind of like, for lack of a better description, kind of dove into the bushes or something, you know. But the movement, it didn't look natural. It didn't look like I would expect if I was to try and do something like that. You would kind of like gather yourself, that you would see, you know, a bending or arms flailing or something like that. It just seemed, it's really difficult to describe what I saw. It just almost melted off into the vegetation. It's you know, my vocabulary fails me here.
Tom, I was sorry, guys. I was going to say, Tom, you had a recent incident where you saw one run, and you can relate and explain that movement.
Yeah, I can. And I was just thinking about that. You know, it's funny because you saw yours, and you're in Ohio. I'm in Oregon, or this incident you saw was in Ohio. The one that I saw was in Oregon on August 15th. And the way that I described its movement was it moved so fast, the movement was done before it started almost. It was that fast.
Yes.
And it was creepy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it had an effect. My wife, I was just talking to her earlier, and she was the first one I called once we got up where we had cell service again, and she could tell that I was, you know, dealing with something here. I don't know exact terminology she used, but she could tell I was upset and fired up, basically, you know. And all I really remember telling her was, they're real. They're not. Because I gotta tell you guys, I've been, you know, I'm 63 years old. I've been aware of these things since the early 70s. You know, you watch stuff on TV. I used to read the books in high school, you know, the John Green books and things like that, and whatever come on TV you'd watch. And I was pretty well convinced in the probability of their existence. But I thought, you know, okay, Canada maybe, something like that, you know. I just, in the back of my mind, I thought it could all be, you know, a load of BS at the same time, just good fun, all that kind of thing. But when you see one with your own eyes and there's no mistaking what you look at, I had about 3 days to try to process this, and then we had a family emergency, medical emergency that kind of pushed this to the back of my mind. And that's kind of well settled now, but it's coming back. And I find myself driving at night. I live in eastern Tennessee, and it's kind of remote here. I always watch the side of the road for eye shine, you know, for deer or anything like that. But now it's a whole new ball game, you know. And like I said, 63 years old. I've spent countless hours hiking, camping, fishing, that kind of thing, and have never seen anything that I couldn't explain as something else, you know. But in this case, that's not true, and I know they're there, and you know, I worry a little bit about going back out. I don't know how I'm going to react the next time. You know, my wife likes to go hiking here. We're in Tennessee mountains, you know, that kind of thing. I'm still processing and dealing, I guess, is what I'm telling you. But it's
okay. So that's interesting. Yeah. Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because Will and I were just talking literally before we got you on the phone about the PTSD, kind of a micro PTSD experience you get when you encounter one of these things. And just it's hard to explain how just simply seeing one of these things or being in their presence, but it does kind of induce it's a very high stress situation. And I would say, for the lack of a better word, it really does, because it kind of dominates your thoughts afterwards. There's like a before and after. Does that kind of accurately describe how you experience it as well?
Oh, yeah. I'm telling you, it almost, when I saw that thing and the realization hit my mind what I was looking at, it almost felt like it sucked the life out of me. You know, you didn't know whether you were even breathing. It happened quick, but it was like getting hit, you know, and again, I'm struggling, you know, to verbalize this, but it's intimidating. Oh my, it is so intimidating to look at one of these things. It was for me. You know, I always thought that if I'd ever see one, I'd kind of dispassionately look at it and take in all the detail and everything, but man, nothing could be further from the truth. This thing scared me bad. You know, it really did. You couldn't have got me out of that car up there for love nor money. You know, my brother, I called him after I got back in the cabin, and he thought I was kidding him at first, but once he realized and talked to my son that, you know, we weren't joking, he said, we'll go back in the morning and see if you can find some evidence, some prints or anything like that. I said, man, I don't need to. I don't need anything to validate it. I know what I saw. There was no mistake. So, yeah,
you know, you really hit
its effect.
Yeah, that's, you know, and that's really an excellent point is, and this is what I've said in the past. People are like, well, why didn't you take a picture? Why didn't? Well, you know what? You weren't there and I was, and I didn't need a picture, okay?
No.
And there wasn't time, and nor was there any inclination whatsoever, because you're in a fight or flee mode. You are 1,000% in that fight or flee mode. The picture isn't for me, because I don't need a picture to tell me what's in front of me. It's for you, for your benefit. And you know, you brought up a really good point, and I didn't think of it till just now. The areas where I've encountered their evidence, I actually don't want to go back to many of those areas. Right? You know, it brings back, there's the trauma of possibly encountering this thing on their terms. It's always on their terms, it seems like, not on yours. And, I just don't, you know, I think about one of the areas where I first encountered footprints. And it's like, these are the first footprints that I found. I wasn't high-fiving and going, yeah, this is great. It's stressful.
Yeah.
You know, you and I talked a little bit about the area, and I think it's significant because it's an area that these creatures are found in. But you said that this road goes to a dead end to what kind of an area?
It's a lowland, boggy, like a wetland area. That's the best I know to describe it. I don't understand the road unless they flooded this. There's a lake there that they flooded, obviously, back in the 40s or 50s or whatever, you know, to create the lake. So I'm thinking this road must have continued on because there's nothing down there. It just kind of dead ends in a bog, you know, and that's the only explanation I can have. But yeah, there are a lot of reports I've heard of down in that area, all the way down through Wayne National Forest. You know, but again, I've never talked to anybody personally that has seen one or, you know, has any real knowledge of the area or the subject, you know, that kind of thing. But and I understand what you're saying too. I'm kind of like 50-50 on it. Part of me would like to see it again, and I'd like a daylight sighting where I could actually see some details. But the other part of me says, you're crazy. I don't want nothing to do with this anymore. You know, so again, I'm still working through this. So.
Yeah, no, it's you know, and going forward, I would not be surprised if this is something that, throughout the day, your mind will wander back to it and wander back, and you'll think it over. And during the quiet moments during the day, you'll ponder, what you saw, and it seems to be that way. It's that way with many, many people that we've talked to. It's my own personal experience, and the same with Will. You talked about the movement. I just want to go back to that for a minute, how it moved across the road in such a way. The morphology, the physiology of these creatures, even though they walk on two legs for the most part, they are not us. It's not, you said you would expect it to kind of do what a person would do, to cross the road, crouch down, and get your muscles and get geared up for that movement. But it didn't do that, right?
No, not at all. It was a really bizarre movement. It just didn't look real the way it moved. It was, if you can imagine in your mind, the side of the road is sloped downhill, and if you would be standing there straight up and down, and then let's say the bank was slippery and it gave way under you, and you would just kind of slide down and to the side, and you would just, almost like the ground swallowed you up. From my perspective of, at this point I was probably 75 feet away from it when it did that, 60 feet, I'm guessing. Because I'm fairly good with shorter distance estimations of, distance in feet and yards and that kind of thing. So I think when my best guess, it was 100 feet when we first saw it, and close to 60 when it disappeared, when it, whatever it was it did. It did whatever it was. I don't know. It was bizarre, the way it moved.
Yeah. And again, you said it was like, you said the whole experience lasted, 5 seconds?
If that, yeah, I would say that tops. It was a wham bam kind of a thing, but it was long enough. It was long enough. Let me just leave it at that. We had to go past it to get out of there. There was only one way out, so I'm glad. If it would have stood its ground, I don't know what we would have done. And I'm kind of convinced that if we would have been driving out of there, normally at a normal speed with the headlights on, we probably wouldn't have seen anything, because it would have just stepped off the road until we passed and then went about its business. But we were going so slow with the lights out, I think possibly it was curious and just hesitated a couple seconds too long, kind of wondering what we were up to. That's kind of, my son and I were talking about that. Maybe that's what happened. But it was plenty long enough to, be sure of what we were looking at. So,
you bring up an interesting point, and I just thought of this, and that is the fact that you had your headlights turned off. Your eyes are already acclimated to that light, to that environment, the light, the ambient light within that environment. Had you had your headlights on, not only possibly would the creature probably looked, I know what this is all about, but your eyes would have I'm just speculating, but maybe they would have been adjusted to what's bright in the road, and anything that's on your periphery is, it's being washed out by the, by the light, by what's in front of you. And so takes a while, just long enough for your eyes to get adjusted to that dark area. Yeah, you may not have seen anything at all.
Yeah. There was no trouble picking this out. There was still enough lights to where you could see the green in the vegetation. Do you understand me? Once you lose light, you lose color, obviously. But you could still see the bark from the trees, the different shades of the vegetation. The road itself was kind of gravel dirt mix, so it was a lot lighter of a color, and that had the backdrop behind this thing, probably 2/3 of its body, but you could still see the other third, the right leg, side, arm, against the lighter green vegetation behind it. So there was absolutely no problem, defining this thing, but it just wasn't enough light, excuse me, to see, face, if there was bald areas on it, if, you know what I'm saying, that kind of thing. There just wasn't enough light for that. But it was
for the fine detail.
Exactly.
So in that time period, besides, did it do anything other than just crossing the road? I mean, was it, when it was standing? Was there anything else that you may have noticed?
No, not really at all. I mean, it was standing squared off to us, and other than, I didn't see any movement. Like I said, if a human was to go to move, you kind of see some animation of some type, bending over, arms moving, like it happened so fast, and I was staring dead at it. My son took his eyes away from it for a second to turn the lights on, and when he looked back up, it was already gone, because he asked me, where did it go? And I started to tell him it just kind of slid off of the road down the bank. It was really, and even now it's real difficult to explain the motion. I have nothing to equate it with. It almost looked like CG or something, something that isn't real. That's what the best I can do at it, so.
Well, what it makes me think of is we had a gentleman on from Montana earlier this year, a gentleman named Wynn, who's part of the Blackfoot reservation up there, and he had described a similar type of almost like a fluid motion of the thing moving across the road. Now, the difference in his situation was it was crawling on all fours, like he said, it was like a spider, the way it moved. And actually, he said it was like, the best way he could describe it was on a mechanics, the mechanics creeper, the way they slide around on those. Yeah. He said it really, the motion reminded him of that. So you had some ambient light.
Hey, Tom.
Any chance? Yeah.
Let me break in a second. Wind's from the Flatheads, not Blackfoot.
Okay. Want to get that straight? Win. Sorry about that.
Yeah. You don't want them mad at you. You don't want them mad at you, bud.
No, I certainly do not. So, did you have enough light? Was there any chance that you may have been able to see or notice the length of the hair, or your impression of that?
No, I didn't really. There wasn't enough time. My mind processed it as an upright, very extremely large figure. There was no time for details. Just, again, the torso, legs, arm, head, that kind of thing. There just wasn't enough time. I wish I could, give a better description of it and all that kind of thing, even for myself, but I can't. It wasn't like I saw hair hanging down off the arms or anything, because the arms were down at the sides, and you could plainly see that. Now, my son concentrated more, seemed to, on the arms, and he said he thought that they were slightly bent in, like towards its body. Its hands would be kind of bent at the elbow, but slightly towards the body. I didn't look at that. I was center mass for whatever reason. That's what drew my attention, and the height was just so impressive. I wish now if I could go back and do it over again the next morning, I would have went back and tried to recreate where we were and that kind of thing. But man, I was still shook up that next morning. I didn't want nothing to do with this joker. I really didn't. And I didn't need no more validation. I didn't need footprints. I didn't need size comparisons or anything like that. My son's a pretty big boy. He's 6'4" and probably 260, 265, you know, so I could have kind of lined that up and kind of guessed, but I didn't feel the need for that at all. I really didn't. I just wanted to get out of the park and get home. It had been a long weekend kind of thing. I had a long ride ahead, and I just didn't want to take the time to go back and look for it. And honestly, I didn't really want to see it again at that point. It's only in the last few days entered my mind the curiosity of a better look. I don't know how these guys go out and look for them. I really don't. I got to hand it to them. They've got more nerve than I got. I don't think I'd be interested in that. You know,
Well,
I'll just take what I got.
My thoughts,
and
yeah. My thoughts are that changes in an instant when they actually see one.
Yes.
It really does.
Yeah,
and it's nothing
real
against,
quick.
you know, I don't have anything against people going out and looking for these creatures. I mean, you know, more, you know, okay, great. But it does change.
Yeah.
So, and now how old is your son?
He's 34. Yeah, 34.
Okay. And you guys probably, I would imagine, discuss this amongst yourselves a little bit?
Oh, my, every day. I mean, he just left yesterday morning for a while, and it would come up at least once a day just about, you know, between him and my wife and my brother, who I told. Those are the only two people that I've told so far. And now you guys, about this.
It's, honestly, it's good to have somebody that you can share it with that doesn't, we talked earlier this week, and one of the factors that people kind of deal with when with one of these encounters is the whole credibility thing. And one of the analogies that I gave was I'd asked you a question. I said, well, okay, this is one weird topic. And the other weird topic would be, you know, what happens when you ask somebody about UFOs, and quite often you get a real similar response. You know, it's all over the board as whether people believe in it or not, or whether they think it's nuts. And, you know, officially their existence has been denied for 50, 60 years. And a lot of people are surprised when they find out, well, gosh, the Pentagon came out in 2017 and acknowledged their existence. They're here. And so if you do a little deductive reasoning, you have to assume that it's not robots flying around out there, but that the systems are, manned or staffed or run by pilots and crew of whatever type of creature. So if that exists, and that's not so weird anymore because we have official acknowledgement on that, my own personal opinion is that the people that scoff and debunk this topic and this subject are, soon to be more and more marginalized and kind of put off to the side. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you on that. Sooner or later, see, now I know that they actually exist. Before it was a probability kind of thing. So it's sooner or later you would think something's going to happen. Maybe they're just kind of priming us, and eventually you'll come out with, and I don't know what they're going to call them. I don't know what they are. We talked about that the other night as well. I mean, I certainly don't think they're an ape or anything. And I remember, I don't even know if I read this in a book or saw it on a TV show, was an American Indian that said, you guys have got it wrong. They're not animals. They are a people. That kind of thing. So somewhere in between, what? I have no idea, but they're obviously intelligent. Sooner or later, it's going to come out, I would think. They're bound to know already, of their existence. Why they deny it or won't acknowledge it, I don't know. They have their own reasons, I guess. But I'm looking forward to that day.
Yeah, and we recorded. I thought it was pretty significant. We had a guest on earlier this year who made a statement that I thought really summed it up perfectly, and we now incorporate that into our intro, and that is we had Larry Batson, who has done years of research on this. I think Will knows a bit more about his bio and his background than I do, but Larry said it's not an ape. If it was an ape, we'd have one already. And that's exactly true, because it's not a human. It's not us. And we're not it. But it is absolutely not an animal. So I think of it in terms for people that want to try to grasp why is it that we haven't seen one, is you have a group of hominid out there, type of people, for lack of a better way to describe it. You got fugitives that are very intelligent in the forest, in the woods, that are perhaps as intelligent as we are. And when it comes to navigating in their environment, we don't hold a candle to them. We really don't, because this is their world now. And the world of civilization, which is our world, whether we live in rural areas or in the city, we all have, that's our environment. We're very good at it.
Right. Yeah, and if you look at it, I don't know the exact percentages of, if you would figure land mass, what's actually developed and populated versus what's undeveloped and unpopulated. I got to think we're in the minority on that one. Just flying over the country would tell you that.
What we call developed is what we might consider to be undeveloped, and an area which would be either a pathway for them or habitat. They don't have to be in a livable habitat to navigate. So we have plenty of encounters where we've talked to people that have seen these things. We had a lady on a few months ago that lived in Illinois, and she lived in a very small town, but it's a town nonetheless, that had a river that ran along it. And you look at the river from Google Earth, and it's got a lot of cover, and she had one right outside of her door one morning. So they can move around unseen. And actually, that brings me to another point of our conversation. When we talked the other day, the area that you live in, you've been a little bit reluctant to attribute it to these creatures, but you're in a rural area, and your nearest neighbors are far away. The one that I found the most significant, and I think you did too, was I believe it was a walnut that came flying. What was it, 60 or 80 yards out of the tree line? And I think most people know this, but walnuts, when they're green, they're covered with a spongy green coating, 1/4 inch thick. They're hefty. They're very heavy and hefty. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that incident.
Okay, that one, I was talking to my wife about that, and she reminded me of something that kind of ties in with this. Well, basically, where I'm living is on the lower north slope of Quinch Mountain in eastern Tennessee. I'm sitting on 8 acres here, and I'm the poor guy in the neighborhood. There's 250 acres to my east. Nobody lives on it. The guy passed away, his family that owns it, they're in Pennsylvania. On the other side is 150 acres. There's a guy who lives there, but he's towards the other side. So there's all these, you got to cross the mountain for my wife to get home from work. Well, there's no cell service, so she would call me right about time the phone would cut out, and I knew I had about 20 minutes or so before she pulled in. Well, on that side of the house, we have a full-length deck. It's about 35, 40 feet long. We have a Australian Shepherd that loves to play with tennis balls. So I would kick this ball back and forth across the porch, and he would chase it down, and for that 20 minutes until my wife got home. Well, I've done this for weeks, but at any rate, the day this happened, my wife gets home, and instead of going directly in, we sat down here on the deck. Well, within just a couple of minutes, I had my back to it, so I didn't see it coming, but I heard it coming through the treetops. I saw her look up and just amazement, and this walnut, it still had that green husk on it, come sailing in and hit, we have a well house, spring house. It hit about 20 feet away from the deck and rolled out into the driveway. Now, she saw this thing arcing and sailing out, and it hit, and she goes, okay, we're going in. She doesn't care nothing for these things at all, even considering they might possibly be around. But she said, and I thought she might be onto something here, that if that's what it is up there, that it's watching this game with this ball and this dog for days on end, and it just wanted to throw, and this walnut is about the size of a tennis ball, the bigger ones, with the green husk. And she said maybe they just wanted the game to go on or something, But I thought that was kind of interesting, She believes me that I saw one, and, well, actually her dad, when he was a young man, lived in Ashtabula County, Ohio, and saw one. And she has no reason to doubt him, and I've known him for 20-plus years, and I've never even caught him in an exaggeration, let alone a lie. So she's reluctant believer. She just doesn't want anything to do with him. But, yeah, she saw that thing come in, and that whole pile of husked walnuts up above the house behind that bush, she saw that. Those two things disturbed her, and she'd probably be willing to tell you what she thinks about it. She's in the house if you'd care to talk to her. But, yeah, she saw that come in, and there's been sounds. You hear the typical wood knocks and tree breaks. I attribute that. I don't put a lot in that, I mean, it could be anything, but I mean, you have naturally trees dropping branches and that kind of thing, which can do that. I also had the 1 week where I described it as if you would lift a 500-pound log and slam it on the ground. That boom, boom, boom kind of sound. That went on for almost a week. I'd hear that just about every evening. But the thing is, this generally only happens, she pointed this out to me, in the fall. So right about now through early winter is when anything unusual that's kind of hard to describe, or explain happens. The rest of the year, it's, uneventful. But yeah, that was really something, because the last I saw, I mean, the walnuts fall down. They don't come sailing through the trees, and I can guarantee you there's nobody up there. It's so thick, the underbrush, poison ivy, and why? Why would anybody be up there throwing walnuts at a house that's, for all intents and purposes, isolated? It just doesn't make sense. So,
well, let me back up for a second on two things. Number one, doing some deductive reasoning, which it's not a real stretch. The bear didn't throw it. The mountain lions don't throw it. The deer, raccoons, okay, nothing. It took hands. So it's one of two things, right?
Exactly.
And like you said, that area is covered with poison ivy. So, plus you don't have neighbors around. So that kind of narrows it down as to whether, something with hands threw it, even though you didn't see who threw it. It's interesting that it was in conjunction with throwing the ball to your dog. But I also want to back up a little bit. You said, and I didn't know about this, there's a pile of walnuts, and your wife she might have an opinion on it. If she would like to, I think, we'd love to have her on and just, if she wants to do it, get her opinion.
Yeah,
On
I can round her up here. She's just right inside. I'm sitting out on that deck right now. So
all right, this is what we call
Sam,
ambush journalism.
Yes, it is. That's all right. I'll pay for it later. You guys are safe.
All right,
so,
good.
Anyway, her name's Tammy. You'll be talking to Tom and Will here.
Hello.
Hey, Tammy. Good to talk to you. This is Tom, and we got Will on the line. Randy
Hello,
was
Will.
just
Hello.
So the reason we got you on the phone was your husband was telling us a little bit about a pile of walnuts, but I just wanted to get your opinion and kind of the backstory on that. What's the story with that?
Well, I don't like the whole pile of walnuts thing because it kind of creeps me out a little bit. He had basically what ended up happening, it kind of like by the time I found out about the pile up there, when I would come home, I would call him. He knew it was about 20 minutes before I'd pull in, and he'd have our dog out on the porch and kind of wear him down a little bit for me because he's kind of high-strung. And they'd play kickball with this tennis ball. And we were talking about that pile of walnuts on there. There were a ton of these things all over the place. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they've got this like green husk, and they're almost the size of a tennis ball would be. Well, there's a huge pile, what turned out to be up, I'm like looking up there right now, I'm sorry, at the top of our property. It's really close to the route that comes over. And we rode up there and looked at it, and he was telling me about it, and I'm looking at this thing, and if I had to guess, it was probably like 2-3 foot across. It was huge. And he tells me to turn around. I turn around and look, and you can see the house from up there. And where the pile is, there's like an indent in the grass, like something had been laying there or sitting there or something. But from the house, when you're on the porch, you can't see. If you were sitting at the base of that tree where these nuts were, the husks were, you wouldn't be seen because of the brush, but you can see a perfect, like you're sitting in a stadium view of my porch, if somebody were to be sitting out on the porch. Well, knowing that, and we're sitting out here, and he's playing this kickball thing, and I come home, and I just sit down on the porch with him, and we stop playing this game with the dog, and these things are falling here and there. You could hear them just dropping in the woods. Well, I'm sitting here, and I look up because I hear rustle, and I would guess it to be maybe 100 feet maybe from our porch, 150 feet from our porch is the wood line. And this walnut husk comes out of the wood line, but it doesn't fall. It arched like it was thrown and then drops and rolls towards what would be our spring house right behind the house here. And I just kind of look at my husband. I'm like, yeah, I'm not liking this. Did you see that? And he said, I didn't see exactly what happened there. I just see this husk kind of come out, and he thought it just fell. I said, it can't fall where it came out. And I showed him how it arched from where it was. And I said, that's kind of freaking me out a little bit. And I wanted to take the dog in the house and go in because I couldn't figure out, to this day, I can't, other than a human being, anything I know of or seen would throw something like that. And we talked about it, and knowing that pile up there behind those shrubs at the base of this tree, knowing the awesome view you have of my porch, I told him, I said, well, whatever. I said, what if something's sitting up there watching you play with my dog and threw the husk because it looks like the tennis ball and just wanted the game to continue. But I didn't like the idea of what could be up there doing that, because I'm like one of those that, I don't really want to ever see this thing because I like going in the woods, and I know my husband saw it, and he's been freaked out about it for quite a bit. It's unnerved him. I think they could exist, but I don't really need somebody to say 100% here it is, because then I could understand what threw that husk, and that just kind of, I don't like the idea of a creature that could be 1,000 pounds out there in the woods, if you understand what I mean there. But that was just kind of weird. I can't explain that away. I can't dismiss it as a bear or a raccoon or a squirrel. I don't know what would pile these things up in such a huge pile. And the only thing I know that can throw is a human being or some big, I guess, like a primate. I mean, I know monkeys and things can throw things. So was it a Bigfoot? I didn't hear anything, but I can't think of what could be up there that would throw a walnut.
Right.
Out.
And what's the motivation?
Yeah. What's that?
And what's the motivation?
What was the motivation? And I thought about that for a long time, and even today I'll ask me, and I said, hindsight being what it is, if it happened today, I'd probably go up there and throw it back and just say, cut it out, because just get off my hill, go over there. But I don't know enough about the whole thing, other than some of the things that Randy tells me about the whole thing. And my dad, when I was really young, my father, he's a police officer, he's told us that he saw one out, we used to live in Ohio, we're in Tennessee now, out east, like Ashtabula County. I don't know how familiar with Ohio you are. It's northeast of Cleveland, close to the Pennsylvania line.
Yeah, right.
He had friends that would go, that had camp and stuff like that, and they'd go hunting and do all that. Well, they went up there one time and, just got a bunch of guys camping and goofing around, and he told me that him and his buddy were walking on this trail and shining the light, and he said, I hit it dead on with my light, and then I dropped my light, and then his buddy was like, did you just see that? And he said, I put the light back up and it wasn't there again. And he said, we just went back to camp and had enough of that, And, he's my dad, so I'm partial to what he would tell me, but being a police officer, I don't think he's going to make something up like that. But he doesn't tell very many people.
Right, yeah, and that, to me, the credibility is pretty high on that story, and does he seem, when people are recounting these stories, their demeanor changes. They a lot of times get serious.
Yeah.
For just that moment, because they're reliving it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is your dad still alive?
Yeah, my dad's still alive.
Okay.
He'll come, he visits, and like him and Randy will talk about stuff, and he goes, I'm telling you, the big guy exists. He said, I saw one. There's not much more to say about it. He's kind of short on the subject. It's like, look, I can't prove it. All I can tell you is, here's what I saw. He said it was brief. It was nothing, glorious. They didn't shake hands or anything like that. He said it was there. I shined my light on it. It was gone, and we'd had enough.
Yeah.
He said, I don't need to see something that big out in the woods and me out there, So, I mean, I was...
without exception, that's the description we get from, I would say, 99.9% of the people we talk to is, I don't need to see it again, or I don't need any additional proof. Oftentimes, how long ago, let me back up for just a moment. When did this happen that you saw this large pile of walnuts, and how long ago was it that the walnut got thrown?
Well, the way I understand it, around here, they tell me that it's the American walnut, and I guess they seed and produce or whatever every other year. So that would have been 2 years ago. And it was all that same during that season, I'm trying to think of probably maybe about a month's time that these things drop off, and they just litter everywhere around here.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're all over. I mean, you'll be
and then
driving
they
down
turn
the road
black
and
and
there's
slimy,
one that'll
right?
bump your car.
Right.
Yeah, then they get all slimy when they decay. And they can get slick if they're all over the road, and if they fall, they'll dent your car if you're going under it. That husk it's kind of greenish when it drops. My concern was it does resemble a tennis ball, and I told my husband, I said, it's just weird. One, the next day I go out and I clean them all up. I don't want them in the yard for the dog to accidentally pick up and get sick, but that just, I don't know, that really kind of unnerved me. I wasn't, I guess the nice way to put it is I wasn't happy about it. The idea of something like that in my backyard kind of, you know, I've accepted that there's bear here and stuff, but
yeah, they don't do
that big kind of. Yeah, they don't. A bear's not going to throw something. It arcs. I mean, I wish there was. If I knew it was going to happen, I could have videoed it. But there's no way to know these things are going to happen. I mean, I guess the theory would be, did they like watching my dog chase this ball back and forth? It's a long porch, the whole front of the house, so they play kickball. And maybe it was like, you know, tuning into your, you know, local sitcom for 20 minutes. I don't know.
Well,
I don't
agreed.
know.
Yeah, I would have to agree that that's a good conclusion, that it was, for whatever reason, it was mimicking that behavior. Why, we don't know. Another thing that's I think a little unnerving is the fact that had it not thrown that, you never would have known it was out there, right?
I wouldn't. No, I would have just kind of wrote off that pile up there as another odd thing that has happened since we moved here. It was
right.
just
So,
I couldn't explain it, but it's just weird, and let's just file it away.
yeah. So you got two pieces of evidence. You've got a large pile. Would you say the pile was a couple feet?
Yeah, it was very big. There had to be. I mean, we collected some in 5-gallon buckets because we were just going to try to, you know, harvest some of the walnuts, roast them, you know, be kind of fun, whatever.
Yeah, right.
And I would say at least 2, maybe 3 of those buckets dumped out. This is just the husk. The nut inside it's gone. It was just a pile of that big green husk.
Oh, no, that's like different. Yeah, that's a different story.
It's as if it's sitting up there husking these and popping them in its mouth like popcorn or something. I mean, who knows if that's exactly what it was doing, or it was just harvesting them and running off. You know, I tried to figure out, could people have done it? But why would they go all the way up there when they could just go to the road? Because you'd have to rappel from the road down because it's a straight drop, and then you come down to our property, or you've got to cross 250 acres of wild with briars and all kinds of everything else when these things line the roads. I can't understand why a human would go into all that trouble for a couple buckets. You know what I mean?
Right.
When
and
you could pick them up along the sides of the road.
Yeah, right. So the terrain is a deterrent, not to mention they'd be on somebody's private property.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors there that would indicate they're not doing that. It doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting that these were as if something had been up there feasting and just, you know, feasting on these things. Like you said, popping them in their mouth like popcorn, which is very, you know, that's, what else would it be?
For lack of a better way to explain it. Yeah, the husk was, it was peeled away. Just like split in 2, peeled away, not like in little sections, like something just pulled the coating off and took the hard nutshell and its contents and was eating it. I found no hard nutshell left, just that soft husk. There was a bunch of it.
You know,
there's probably a picture in one of our cameras somewhere, but that we didn't think to put anything down for size comparison.
Right.
I was just in so much, oh my gosh, what is this? And this is so huge. Not a squirrel, not even a raccoon. They won't sit in one pile and do it. I could see maybe a squirrel running off with a couple, or even a raccoon running off with a couple, and they leave as they eat. But this is a pile, like something's been spending time up there.
Yeah.
That's where it kind of creeped me out. And then when the one got thrown so close to the house, I didn't even know that there was something in that part of the woods. It's pretty dense. So the idea of something being that close to my house just kind of, I don't know, it unnerved me.
Well, you just made me think of something else.
It makes you want to sleep with a firearm next to your bed a little more.
Well, I want to say this, and I just thought of this. So your house do you have any trees close to your house, or is it kind of, you've got a meadow or like a clearing till you get to this forested tree line?
A little about, if you're on the back porch, it's cleared on the back hill, but it is surrounded by tree line. And actually, the tree line, our driveway comes up and circles to what is the front of the house, but it faces the mountain. The tree line is about maybe 100 feet from this porch, and then goes up at an angle and makes kind of like a U. Would be a good example. It's U'd around the back of our property, and my husband mows the middle section just to keep it open and keep it clean.
Okay, well, where I'm going with all this is it's probably the reason you haven't had more encounters or more visual indications is having that open area. And Will, you've talked about this, that people that are having problems with the creatures on their property, what is the distance, the kind of the minimum distance that you say is required to cut back the trees?
You need at least 50 feet. Because they'll use that vegetation for cover. Yeah.
And that would make sense. Because, most of it behind our house is pretty wide open. And like I said, it's kind of like a U. We're kind of in this little hollow back here. And then they would have to cross in a pretty open area if they wanted to walk right across, and you'd see them. There would be no way. But there is enough cover that if they're careful, they could follow the U and get kind of close. But then they've got to traverse back up some, I would imagine, uncomfortable terrain. I wouldn't want to do it. I like to hike, but I don't want to, break a leg trying to climb around stuff. But
I don't know that the climbing around. I don't know that that's not an issue for these creatures. I mean, they climb some pretty steep, vertical cliffs and that sort of thing with hardly any effort. But the open area is a real deterrent, and so I would encourage you keep that area open, and that's probably why absolutely. That's probably why you haven't had anything more than the walnut issue, which is you want to keep it that way. At least I would. Yeah,
I would like to. I mean, I'm not even fond of, we know there's a black bear back here. And I even looked up to try to figure out if black bear would do this. And I've talked to the locals and just, Google. And everybody said, no, black bear won't do that. They're really not that interested in that. That's more effort for them than what they could be eating. And I'm like, okay, well
sure.
I don't know about black bear. I'm from Ohio. We didn't have black bear.
Well, right. And so I would say that that's probably, more effort than it's worth for the black bear, because they just kind of plunder along. Tammy and Randy, I hope you're listening. Both of you guys, I want to thank you, and stay in touch with us. If there's any new developments, get a hold of us. And again, I just want to thank both of you for your encounter, for your story.
Absolutely, we really appreciate it.
Oh, sure, thank you.
Welcome back from the break, everyone. Tom and the judge are on this segment. Fellas, how you doing today?
Real good.
Well, Tom, I guess Brian didn't respond, so I don't know if he's doing something else today. So let's go ahead and we're just going to do a Q&A and general discussion session, fellas. So, Tom, I know you probably have a question or two to start with.
Yeah, we have some really good questions. A gentleman named Richard wants to know, what type of Bigfoot do you feel is most likely to be encountered in western Kentucky?
From what I have learned, the type 2s seem to be predominant in that part of the country.
Okay, and then, for our audience, what is the difference? Because I think the differences are a little bit subtle. Yeah, between the type 1s and type 2s?
They are. They're very similar in appearance. The main difference is, of course, if you see their teeth, the type 1s don't have pronounced canines, the type 2s do. And the type 2s will go, as far as locomotion, on all fours as often as they do bipedally, where the ones out here in the West Coast, the type 1s are primarily bipedal. They will go on all fours occasionally, but not as often as the type 2s will.
Okay, and another, and this is just my personal question: do you feel one may be more aggressive than the other?
Yeah, the type 2s seem to be a little more aggressive, and they're also, it seems to be when they're seen by witnesses, they're more often seen in multiples. In other words, you'll see 2 or 3 of them together or more, whereas the type 1s, oftentimes you'll just see a single individual. Now the other ones may be nearby, but you'll just see the single one.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. All right, Richard, thank you. That's an excellent question. Yeah, that's, and, again, I want to get into one of my favorites is the type 3, which is sort of elusive, a little more rare, but basically kind of like from what I understand, it's got the pronounced snout. Mm-hmm. A Bigfoot walks on, bipedally, and but it's more of a baboon type face.
Yeah, it's probably, it's probably a recessive gene or two at work there, having that elongated face like, more archaic apes do.
And I would assume, based, I don't know if we have a lot of data on this, do they have the canines? Do we know if they have the canines?
I don't know for sure. I would assume so, since that's an older version, of a simian feature. So my source hasn't told me all that yet because I haven't gone to see him. And as soon as I do, we'll have more information.
Okay, awesome.
Can I jump in here?
You bet.
Well, one of the things I hear about a lot, and I listen to many, many, many accounts during the week. Let me start with this. From the standpoint of intelligence, we recognize that the intelligence of a Sasquatch is far superior to that of normal animals. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
With that being said, do you feel they have a capacity for compassion? Because I hear, not a lot, but I hear these few accounts where they will accept food, return some gift for the food, perhaps protect a family or a child. Do you think that is viable with certain of the Sasquatch, or if they're all just basically renegades to be avoided at all cost?
Well, first of all, it's an unknown. Secondly, when you look at all primate behavior, primates are actually fairly selfish. In other words, they think about themselves predominantly when they're doing, whatever they're doing throughout their day. So if it comes to, accepting food and things like that, it's not out of an act of kindness. They're doing it because it's opportunistic. It's there, it's available, they don't have to work for it, so why not take it?
But what about reciprocation? We hear people say they left apples and in return they got fish.
I don't know about that. I mean, that's something that has to be field tested, and you have to have, it has to be documented that, cause and effect is at work over repeatability in a situation like that. And we don't know if that's actually happening. People say it. Just because people say it doesn't mean it's happening. There could be other things at work there. So, in my experiences, I'm not seeing that.
Well, if we could test it, maybe we could tie Tom to a tree and see if we get anything in return.
With a ham sandwich, of course.
Yes, of course.
Well,
Tom, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, and yeah, Tony would be, right there with me. I got a question for the two of you, and Tony, actually, this is a little more for you. Okay, so let's be hypothetical, and let's say that they do return.
Is this who can run faster?
Yeah. If they do return a fish, okay, what we don't know is we're assuming intent, but we don't know what the intent is. Are they putting the fish there because they're saying thank you? Are they putting the fish there because they know that humans like to fish? Maybe we will come back and grab the fish, and while we're grabbing the fish, boom, there's their opportunity, and they grab us. Any thoughts from either one of you?
The example that I heard was a gentleman was fishing, and that he had left his food by his camper or whatever, and the Sasquatch allegedly took his food, and then knowing that he was fishing, he might have seen him catch a fish, brought fish to the campsite to replace that which he had taken. And I think Will answered that. I guess it has to be studied a little more. But, you drop a pellet and a rat eats the pellet and learns that if he eats the pellet and does another action, he gets another pellet. If these are beings that are higher in intelligence than a normal animal, it could be that they are actually recognizing the fact that they have taken something, they want to replace it with something else, which is a more human trait, I guess.
I've actually interviewed quite a few people where, food was being observed, being taken by the creatures, and in none of those cases there was any sort of reciprocation. They simply took it, and that was that. And that's from loggers' lunches, food drops by the Forest Service, firefighters, etc. So if they really are leaving something, it's probably as a bait situation. They're trying to elicit some kind of behavior from a human that's not very nice for the human.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do hear.
Do you know of any instance? Have you heard of any instance, either of you, where any kind of benevolent behavior has been exhibited on the part of a Sasquatch?
No, it's been the opposite in almost every single case.
Okay.
I mean, I've heard the accounts, but they're unsubstantiated, and to me they feel like not even an embellishment, but just sort of a fabrication of just somebody coming up with an interesting idea.
I think sometimes it's how the person telling it, it's their spin, it's their beliefs. They're placing their beliefs on a situation. It's how they felt about, their interpretation is what I'm getting around to. It's how they interpreted a situation when, if you look, you have to step back oftentimes, in fact, every time, as much as possible and really get a larger view of the situation and what was going on and what had been going on around the area and other locations. And almost always there are other situations that have occurred in that general area that can give you some insight about what's really going on there.
Let's slice the salami a little thinner. I had a con law professor that used to say, let's do this. Let's slice it thinner. Let's look a little. We have accounts, I don't know, I guess a half a dozen that I've heard out of hundreds, where a child goes missing and is returned home by a Sasquatch. Would you again, benevolent behavior, would you reject that out of hand?
I don't know if I totally reject it, but I'm not really supporting that because I just don't see any evidence that supports that.
We've seen the account where the little boy falls into the gorilla cage and dominant male protects, I've seen it, protects the child from the other gorillas until he can be extracted. I've seen that myself. It's a YouTube video. With a higher degree of intelligence, would you not think that that could be a behavior a Sasquatch could exhibit?
It could, but typically, I mean, based on what I know of their behavior, which is fairly extensive, it doesn't support it. I mean, their attitude is very different.
Yeah, I think it gets into, and this is just my speculation, so everything's on the table, including that I'm mistaken about this, but it seems like there's, people tend to anthropomorphize, what the creatures are. And this is just, and Tony, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just...
there's nothing wrong with disagreement. This is what this is all about.
Yeah, it's an open forum. My own personal thoughts on the creatures has kind of evolved, since I've gotten interested in the topic. And where I'm at right now is I think that the creature is totally, it's hominid, but I don't know that there can be a kind of a meeting of the minds or a meeting of the souls or anything like that between humans and these creatures, because they are driven. Their nature dictates that they behave one way. Their motivation, everything about them moves them in one direction, and then ours moves in an entirely different direction. So we may have, humans can have protective and benevolent behaviors, but something that lives in the wild, I just don't know.
Well, here's something to consider. When we had John on, our anthropologist, he made an interesting point. He said a lot of times it depends on head shape and how that affects the brain. We're assuming that the Sasquatch and humans are both using reason in terms of their basis for their thinking, and it's probably not the case. His point was, from his looking at things, different skull shapes and things like that, not with the Sasquatch, but head shape can give you an idea what skull shape would be from photographs, Patterson Sasquatch, etc., real photographs, that their behavior may be more emotion-driven rather than reasoning, where ours is reasoning. So they're two very different approaches to situations.
But wouldn't emotion come into play? Now, I don't want to be a lot of ifs. If you start throwing in different things, you skew the original thought. But if we're dealing with emotion, wouldn't you think that a female Sasquatch would have emotion towards a young child and protect it, return it perhaps? Or in some of these cases where we find deceased, very, very young children on a rock 5 miles away, but unharmed.
Well, you don't know what did that in those cases. I mean, again, there's too many unknowns there. And with a female Sasquatch, again, that goes back to reasoning. That's not so much emotion. It's more reasoning. You know, with emotion, you're going to have more instinct rather than, you know, an emotional, or not emotional, but a reasoning basis.
That would be instinctual. A young child
for your own kind, not another species, especially one you view as dangerous. One thing about human children is they know that adults are nearby, and that's a bad situation for them.
Okay.
You know, we've talked about in the past how the creatures have been known to take humans from time to time. And so, you know, in this scenario, you're talking about, you know, a child is... Do we know if there's any instances where children have been taken by the creature?
There have been a couple were reported where, you know, a kid was seen, you know, draped over a shoulder or whatever, and then never found again. That's the only ones I'm familiar with.
Yeah, that's a famous incident. We can't discount the number of disappearances either. But obviously we're not talking about them being returned, just taken. And that's a whole nother subject.
You know, I've got a question. I'm just going to kind of move in a different direction here. Population, the theoretical or speculated population of the creatures. Does it seem like, and where I'm going with this is the reports are coming in more often, and there's more and more reports that are, you know, they harmonize with each other. They you know, the repeatability and the actions are similar. Does it feel like maybe the population of Sasquatch, at least in North America, is on the increase?
Well, I've mentioned this before. I mean, I was told in a ballpark figure what the numbers were. It was estimated in the 1950s on the continent there was around 50,000. Now, I don't know how accurate that was, but that was the estimate. Today it's six figures, and who knows? I mean, that's quite a range. But looking at what we're seeing on the ground, we're seeing a lot of juveniles, especially a situation that's currently going on in Arizona. There's a situation there where we're getting hundreds of tracks every time our guy goes into this location, and there are 6 or 7 juveniles, one adult in the area at least. We think there are other adults in the peripheral area around that area, but it seems to be this one location, a lot of juveniles, including a photograph of one. So, and that's just one situation. This is happening in many, many places. So, lots of juveniles, so that tells me the population is increasing.
You know, one of the questions I have regarding juveniles is they haven't fully developed or it's speculation, but they haven't fully developed the ability to conceal, remain concealed, hold their cool, so to speak. And so I think I remember some time ago you had mentioned that a significant ratio of the sightings is actually people who've seen juveniles.
There's a lot of them, especially this past year. Much more than what we ever saw in the past.
I would think that with a population that is increasing, there is still plenty of room for them to exist without having to come into popularized, that's not a word, highly populated areas. We hear about that coming into town, but there's so much acreage, thousands and thousands of acres that are heavily wooded and probably never had a human footprint there, that you would think that there would be sufficient room for them to get away from the population as opposed to wanting to come in.
Yeah, there's a lot of room. It's, there's no shortage of space by any stretch of the imagination. When they're coming around populated areas, it's because there are things that are easy to grab there. There's pets, there's pet food, there's just things that we leave out thinking that no one's going to bother, and for them it's an easy meal.
It's fast. That's an interesting point. I find that the attributes of these things are absolutely frightening. From the standpoint of they have been seen moving from tree to tree in the trees, jumping from tree to tree. They leave no footprints. We've heard accounts of them being able to literally crawl like a ninja, and the speed is undeniably fast. With those attributes, you would think it would be much easier to grab a deer than to expose themselves in a population.
Well, you have to remember, it's a mathematical equation. You have to have more food intake, more caloric intake than you have it being utilized for survival. That's a survival equation. So in their environment, would take a lot of calories burned up to go running a deer down. Now, certainly they can do it, and they do it occasionally. Most of the time they ambush, but if there's something that's easy to grab, if you're in their feet, so to speak, wouldn't you take the opportunity to grab something that was simple and you didn't have to work at? I mean, we see other animals do it all the time.
Well, it would depend upon the caloric content or the protein content of what they're getting. Are they going to get the nutrition they need from a used Big Mac or scraps
but
from
it's
the
easy
table?
To get. You're walking over there and grabbing it and eating it. You're not using any energy per se.
But you would have to get a lot more.
You would, but it's still, they eat a lot of things that supplement their diet anyway. They're always eating. So if something is simple, why not?
I guess the risk of exposure.
You're there in the middle of the night. Who's out there looking?
Judge, I want to jump in with just a thought. And this was, I actually had this with a gentleman I was talking to last night. And what we consider wilderness and what they consider wilderness, what we consider cover and concealment and what they consider cover and concealment could be two different things. For example, we had a guest on last year that lived in a rural town, but a town nonetheless. I think she said it's a town of about 5,000 people in Illinois. And she looked out her window early one morning, and there was one crouched down. And her story was absolutely credible. So we looked it up on Google Earth. There was a clear pathway along the river going to that would get this creature into the town and around the town, especially in the early hours of the morning. And so that kind of led me to believe that maybe because they are known to use rivers and especially creeks as highways, as their main area that they can travel in, because they have a lot of cover and concealment. And a lot of the ways that they conceal themselves, if somebody does come along, is with they don't move. And we don't pick up on the movement. And if it's in the early hours or in the twilight, not to mention if it's nighttime, you're not going to see them. I'm just throwing that out as an idea. Any thoughts or speculation on that?
Yeah, sorry.
Well,
Brian's going to be joining us here momentarily, fellas, so sorry about that.
That's quite all right. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think there's any question that when people are interrogated or questioned, there's always a creek bed, a dry creek bed, a stream, a river, And most of those are lower than the surrounding area, and it's a super highway in and out. There's no doubt about it. I just hesitate. I guess I just hesitate to think that they're going to come into towns and it could be that the food supply is diminished in these areas.
Typically, it's not they're coming into a town; they're coming to the peripheral areas. The edges of places like that, rural areas.
That's what I meant. And it could be that they've depleted the game animals in those areas as well. It just sounds like to me, a foolish way of obtaining sustenance is going through garbage cans.
Well, they are masters of cover and concealment. And if they did come into town, I'm certain that they're going to wear a fedora and sunglasses so nobody notice them.
The fedora I like.
But however much it seems, they still do it. We get lots and lots of reports of this stuff. I've seen it myself in certain areas, going through garbage that people leave behind, especially farm areas where I had my own sighting. They were near our barn, and there was lots of food there available. So, as opposed to going out and spending lots and lots of time trying to, waiting for a deer to come by, you go to the nearest farm, you go to in the barn and you grab whatever's available. And we had plenty there. And usually in barns, there's all kinds of food, grain. We had stuff for our pigs. The pigs were there. Calves, lots of stuff.
That makes sense because the quantity.
Yeah, if you have, and on farms, you always have a lot of quantity. So,
right.
And I'm going to jump in with just a recent experience I had. We've talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but I was with a group up in an area in the Cascades. And we were just doing a little bit of looking into an area where we thought they might be. And it was just a bust. The whole day was just absolutely nothing. And we went into this one final area to kind of vet it and make sure that they weren't there. And in my heart of hearts, I knew that they were not there. But, okay, sure, we'll go along. Let's make sure we leave no box unchecked. Excuse me. And we went in there, and sure enough, there was nothing. But as we were leaving the area, we encountered a juvenile, and it revealed itself. Actually, I'll just tell you, it revealed itself because we got very, very close to it. All of a sudden, I picked up a real stench, an odor I'd never smelled before. And I asked the other two guys if they smelled it. To their credit, they said no, but they insisted that we go back. They're very professional people, highly trained. And they said, no, we're going to go back to the area where we smelled it. We went back, and both of them exclaimed that they could smell it. They had never smelled anything like that before. And then as we were leaving the area, both of us had visual sightings. It's very brief. But the odor followed us. And I know that I'm 99% sure I know which creature it is, and it was a juvenile, partly just because of its color. It was black, just jet black. But the point that I'm trying to make is it had been observing us for quite some time in this area. Gave no indication until we pushed and probably got within 40 feet of it, perhaps less. And then it felt the pressure, and it kind of, broke and revealed its existence.
And there's a good point there also is, I've been told by folks a number of times, you, Tom, and some others that we're close to, that we're going to an area where they aren't. Never assume that. Because just when you think you're going to someplace they are not, then there they are.
That's becoming a joke.
It is.
It's, when I ran into the footprints a couple of years ago, my buddy said, don't ask, I'm never coming back. We're not going there. I hate to be hard, but that's the way it is. A month and a half later, I said, listen, we're going to go to this other area where they're not. And he's like, yeah, that's great. And they were there on buckets.
Tom, can I just ask a question real quick? Like, what did it look like? Did it give you any facial expressions, or what were his arms like, or can you give us any more details?
Yeah, no, Brian, that's an excellent question. And I spoke with the gentleman last night who was with me, one of the guys that was with me, and what he saw was exactly what I saw. So although in two different areas. And when you look at the area in Google Earth, you can see a corridor from the satellite view that these things can travel in. But you can't see it from the ground, because you don't have that overhead view. So what he saw was there's like a tunnel, for lack of a better word, 50 feet away. It is so fast. It just zipped by. And using his typical vernacular for these things, he exclaimed he saw it. And so we exited the area in a way that was away from that. We get onto this Forest Service road, and then we traveled, would have been probably due north, 75, 80 yards to our vehicles. And I was looking down it's like literally a tunnel through the woods. You know what I'm talking about, where you can just see, there's like a clearing, heavily forested area, and then there's just this spot that I can see about 60, 75 yards in there. And I saw it, and it was just this flash. And honestly, the best way I can describe it is it was over almost before it started. It was that fast. So kind of a long-winded explanation, Brian. I didn't see anything other than just it, like I have this little tiny tunnel, and it just zipped by really fast.
Right. Mm-hmm.
No time to see face or anything, but you saw movement that didn't belong. It shouldn't have been there.
Right. And you know that Mama and Papa were probably in the area too.
No, I don't think they were. They may have been, because we hung around the area until long after dark.
That was probably a century.
And yeah, that was kind of the speculation. Now, there were other creatures around, because we were probably surrounded in not quite a 360 degrees. I'd say more like 270, 280 degrees around us. We had a lot of activity at nighttime, but again, due north, we heard these yells or these screams from a long distance away. And looking back, I think that what was going on was probably part of the family unit was, yelling at them or signaling to them, looking for a response. And of course, they didn't get a response. So it was an interesting night, and one of my favorite. Well, there's a lot of. We heard a lot of loud cracks and noises and grunts and stuff. But to the field, to the west of us, just on the other side of the street, just literally 20, 30 yards away, was crickets. It's full of crickets. So the crickets would stop for a little bit, and then they'd start up again, and they'd stop because there's something out there. And then they stopped for about an hour. And Will, I've told you this. There's a cartoon by Gary Larson where the people are going, oh, thank goodness the blasted crickets have finally stopped. And there's a Bigfoot standing there.
And that's what happened to us at the Clark Ranch also many years ago.
Yeah, it's you had frogs, right? And the frogs had stopped.
They did,
okay.
and we knew they were there because one of the guys in the group actually saw one behind the tent standing there staring at him. So, and we heard, they were screaming all around. We've talked about this before, but yeah, that was, we could tell that it was moving. At least one of them was moving around the camp because of the way the frogs would stop.
Yeah, let me ask you this. While they're moving around the camp, were there little indications, like just subtle little snaps or breaks or any noises?
No, you couldn't hear anything. It was silent. And I mean, the frogs, there were thousands of them all around us, and it was almost deafening. And then all of a sudden, on one side of us, a big section, they would just stop. And the other ones were continuing their noise. And then, like, let's just say, and I think it was kind of a counterclockwise motion, then the next progressive spot, if you were moving through that area around circling the camp, the next place would stop. And then over farther on our left, they would stop there, and then behind us they would stop, and then they would stay stopped for 20-30 minutes or so, and then slowly they would all start up again, and then it would be noisy for maybe an hour, and then this process would repeat. And during one of those times where they were all silent, that's when we were on high alert. Everybody had their backs to the fire and facing the 4 different directions. There were only 4 of us there. And my best friend Milo was turned around asking me a question, and I wasn't going to turn around and look at him. I just sort of turned my head and answered. And then when he turned back, this thing was standing behind the tent, and it was one of those 6-foot cabin tents, and the creature was, at least 2 feet above that, just glaring at him. He jumped with a familiar expletive, and in that time, the creature just stepped back in the darkness and was gone. But we found footprints and everything. I mean, it was, there were at least a couple of them near us, and there were others farther away because the ones nearby would vocalize, it would scream, and then the other ones, we don't know how far away they were. We estimated a mile or so. We have no idea. They would answer back, and this went on all night, all this activity.
I got to say, I love the frogs and I love the crickets because those are our sentries.
So it's a great early warning device, let me tell you. They're just ratting them out.
Because they are. And it was the same thing, because this field that was to the west of us, like I said, just, a stone's throw away, there would be a section of it where the crickets would stop. Like, okay, they stopped for a reason.
Right. And
then it would move around.
I've always thought, too, I've been in places where, chipmunks are pretty noisy in the trees.
Yes.
And sometimes you see them there, but then they all go silent. And I didn't see or hear anything, but it's a situation where I'm always paying attention, especially since that night at the Clark Ranch, back in 1976. Ever since then, if I'm in a situation, I'm always, I guess in the back of my mind, paying attention to what's going on in the surrounding areas. Things that happen that normally would not happen. There's got to be a reason those things are happening.
Well, how do you account for this, Will? We have creatures that are hundreds of pounds, and people always say they hear little branches or sticks that crack, and then there are times when they hear absolutely nothing, but the creature's moving. I've heard it say that the snaps are intentional.
That's what I was just going to say. They're letting you know they're there.
That's right. But the question I have is, how on earth does a creature that size walk through the woods without crunching something?
Well, first of all, it's not a casual stroll like we would, and their feet are designed different than ours. I've got a lot of casts sitting right here in my office, and when you look at the feet, especially when they have moved over objects on the ground, it really very clearly shows just how thick that pad is. And it molds itself around objects. So when they're breaking something, they're doing it intentionally because they don't have to. And that foot probably the way it's designed with that thick pad and their toes are curled is probably very useful in climbing trees. So, but it also works as far as being silent on the ground.
Judge, that's an excellent point. I have wondered that myself, and that maybe they.
I was taught that when you hunt, you take 2 steps and you stop, and 2 more and you stop, because the footfalls of a human are really distinctive to the animals out there. So when I hunt, that's the way I do. But I'll tell you, it's tough not to step on sticks.
But you're wearing a shoe.
That's true.
And even if we were barefoot, our feet are still kind of rigid. You're still going to make noise. Their feet aren't designed like that.
Okay.
Yeah, they have sound absorbers in the pads. But also, I would imagine, I mean, they live. This is their world, okay? The best analogy I can think of is I could probably pretty stealthily walk through my living room and not make noise. The woods, although the woods have a lot of, dead branches and you just got stuff, grass, all kinds of things out there. I think that's just their world. And, I would love to be able to somehow film the creatures sneaking through the woods, and just, even if it was just like a few seconds, just to see, hey, how do they do that?
And I can tell you, humans can do it. I was a cavalry scout in the Army, and most of our work was done at night. Foot patrols. When I was with the Air Cav, we worked at night, and with just a little bit of practice, and we did it many times, we could sneak right up within a few feet of somebody, and they never knew we were there. And that's with carrying gear and our boots on.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be done.
That's a good point.
Well, let me ask another question that has always in the same line. Trail cams are put up, and to no avail. Infrared, they can see, et cetera, et cetera. Has anyone attempted to put up a cam that responds to pressure? A pressure switch?
Not that I'm aware of.
I would think that would be a heck of a way to do it.
Now, we did get a picture, and I think you've seen that. Yeah, you did see that one from Arizona of a juvenile sitting in a water tub. So
yeah, we're going to argue about that all day, but go ahead.
So there isn't any argument. I know what that is. That one, the juveniles aren't as aware of things like that because the guy down there, Jason, has got a bunch of pictures, where they don't seem to care about his game cam because there's one, you can see the belly button on the thing and some other features. So that's something we're learning too. Apparently the juveniles aren't as wary as the adults are of things like that. But typically, and all primates are very wary of human-made objects in their area. So it's not just the IR. It's the fact that it's in their house. If it wasn't in their house, it's not such a big deal like the one at the ranch. That was part of the ranch. So it wasn't a concern.
Hey guys, I want to back up for just a second. I want to clarify something. The argument, or not argument, just the disagreement is not whether or not it is a creature in the picture. It's the age of the creature and the size of it. Is that right?
Yeah, with just the size of the tank that he is sitting in or on. We could argue about that all day, I guess.
No, we got clarification on the size. It was 2.5 feet tall and 4 feet wide.
Did they measure?
He did.
Did they measure the actual cistern?
He did.
Okay.
Yeah, so based on that, the creature would only been between 4 and 5 feet tall. It's a very young one.
But a good point about, again, the juveniles tend to be less. Yeah, they're juvenile. So you think in terms of children. They're not as developed in their stealth and their understanding of being quiet and not revealing their existence.
Hey, Tom, let me ask you, though, when you saw that, what were its arms? Were its arms longer than a human's?
Yeah, good point, Brian. It was so fast. Honestly, like 1001, it was done. What I saw was looking down this tunnel was something that moved by so fast. There was zero time to, distinguish any features. What I saw was movement in an area where there shouldn't have been any.
Yeah, Dalton. Dalton was with you, and he's been on before.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we're going to get him on again to talk about it. He got a good look at it.
Yeah. Well, I talked to him last night. He said that it was a similar situation. And again, looking at it from the satellite view, I'm pretty sure that what we were looking at was they or it or whatever was moving around, navigating in this corridor within this little forested area. But from our perspective, it isn't. And he saw, it was a flash. So I don't think he saw a whole lot more than I did. He's a highly trained observer. We'll just put it that way. He's very good at this. And so when he says he saw one, of course he did. And using his typical Dalton military vernacular, he let us know that he saw one. And then it was probably 15 minutes after that we had worked our way out of this area back to our vehicles. And that's when I saw the creature as well. So more or less, if you were to look at it from overhead, where he saw it was pretty close, proximity-wise. I mean, probably within less than 100 yards of where I saw it. I would say less than 75 yards, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I didn't. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to see or distinguish any features like arms or face or any of that. It was just, you're in the woods, you're in the wilderness, and I'm looking down and, I'm just looking all over the place. And I just my attention is drawn to an area. There's a couple of saplings, and then 20 yards beyond the saplings, I've got a old growth Doug fir lying on the forest, and then probably several yards beyond that it's just this corridor of this little tunnel I can look into, and boom, I just see something zip by.
Yeah. I mean, like at the time, and this is also, I guess it's a question for Judge as well. I mean, at the time, were you just terrified, or were you just kind of like surprised at what you saw?
Oh no, the anxiety level was ramped up 100% because we know what we're dealing with, and we knew that, and you can't see it. You got a threat that's very, very close. And yeah, we're all on maximum high alert. Situational awareness is at 1,000%.
Yeah.
It has a physiological effect as well. And I will say that I could have been better hydrated. I wasn't as properly hydrated as I should have been. It was well over 100 degrees, somewhere between 102 and 106 degrees out. It was hot. It was dry. And so when this situation came up, the heat, lack of proper hydration, and the situation.
So what you're telling us, Tom, is you were hallucinating.
Nope, not saying that at all. What I'm saying is when you get into a situation that, and I understand, Tony, or excuse me, Judge, Your Honor, I think you're just, being humorous, but
I'm pulling your chain.
Yeah, I know you are. No, it's neither I nor Dalton were hallucinating. And we didn't hallucinate, the three of us didn't hallucinate the odor of this creature. It was Dalton and the other guy that we were with are experienced hunters since they're little kids. And I've been out in the woods all my life. And, I don't have quite the level of experience that they do, but I've been hunting and I know what a dead carcass smells like. And the conversation that we had is it did not smell, not only did it not smell like a deceased carcass, it didn't smell like any other, honestly, any other foul odor we'd ever encountered before. And I found that interesting at the time.
Somebody mentioned the physical aspects of this, and I think next week we will have someone on who's going to say that he went to the hospital as a result of what he felt was intense infrasound. Will, what's your opinion on that? Do you believe that, first of all, there is such a thing? And second of all, can it be debilitating to the point where someone is physically ill?
Well, you know, we talked to John, our anthropologist, about that some time ago, and he said he doesn't see any problems with, you know, something like a Sasquatch being able to use infrasound. Having said that, of course, we don't know a great deal about it. You know, it's one of those areas that's still being studied and learned about. But could they use it? Sure. Could it be harmful to humans? Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, in the last, I'd say, month, Tom, haven't we had like 3 different circumstances with people having the same effects where their doctors said that they thought they were having heart issues, and actually the doctor, when they did their, you know, checkup on the persons, they said it was more, they felt it was more of a constriction of their esophagus and not a heart issue.
Yes, that is correct. And I want to just jump in again. I'm going to go back to the experience that I had. So, I would say within 30 to 60 seconds after we were, you know, searching this area that we were in, and then we detected that odor, and we just, and it's time to leave. Okay, we're going to get out of there. And the area that we wanted to exit was blocked by where this creature would have been. So we can't go that way. We had to go another direction, which had some obstacles in it. I felt ill immediately within 30 to 60 seconds after that. Not only did my energy level drop, you know, as I said, from about 85% down to about 8%, but I just felt physically ill and not able to really concentrate. And I was in an area, well, I just had, you know, the 2 other people that I was with were a little bit, not far, but a little bit of a distance from me. So I will never know for certain if it was an effect of this infrasound or just the situation. But I thought at the time, and I still think it's on the table, that it was a mild case of the infrasound.
Well, Tom, let me ask you, do you think that it could have been like a mild heart attack almost?
No, it wasn't that. Well, I don't know. I've never had a heart attack before. I want to keep it that way. It almost felt like a very rapid onset of the flu is kind of what it felt like. I just didn't feel right. I just got sick. I got ill. And so we got back to the vehicles, and I started immediately trying to rehydrate myself, see if that would help. And that's when that's when I saw the creature, when I looked through that tunnel, through the woods. I was looking in there, and I saw that rapid movement. So, and then we, shortly afterwards, we got into our vehicles. We headed out of that area into a town that, to call it a town, it's basically a gas station and a store. That's it. That's when I called you and kind of gave you a quick sit rep on the situation.
Right.
Will, do you obviously have heard of situations where individuals feel something, are disoriented, and found disrobed, alive. One case was a bicyclist. He was with friends. He went ahead of everyone else, and when they found him, he had stripped down.
Well, if I were disoriented, I think the last thing I'd do is take my clothes off. That could lead to a bad situation.
Well, it could lead to a real bad situation or a real good situation, depending on the situation. But if infrasound increases, like body heat, for instance, overexertion, the body fear, people become very afraid, and then they get warm. You think there's any credence to that at all?
I don't. From what I've learned recently, I don't think that's an effect of infrasound, because the effects in all three of these cases in the last 30 days were identical, where the people felt physical effects up to internal bleeding and internal organ damage. It was more of a compressed feeling or like heart attack. It wasn't heat. They didn't have the feeling of needing to take their clothes off, and be one with Mother Nature. I just don't think that's an effect of infrasound. Now, if we can...
Hey, I'm going to move on.
Go ahead, Tom.
Go ahead, Will.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to move in a little different direction here. While we still got time, we have a question, and this is, this is a question for Will. So I can put that on hold for a moment while you're about to say something, and I'll just come back to that.
No, I was just going to mention before that if if we can get somebody who's not more knowledgeable in the field of science on infrasound, we'll do that. But from talking with John, our anthropologist, and a medical doctor friend, that those weren't the type of effect an infrasound would have on another creature. It would be more of those physical effects.
Okay, interesting. All right, we got a gentleman here, and he wants to know, and I like this question. This is, and I think I've heard you address this before. Is it possible to cast a snow track?
Yes, absolutely. I know back in the 60s, or it could have been early 70s, the Skamania County Sheriff, Bill Klosner, cast some tracks in Skamania County, and they used... let me think, it was some kind of, and I may be misquoting it here, some kind of liquid sulfur or something along those lines. I'd have to look it up to find out, but yes, there are ways of casting tracks in snow.
Okay. And the question I have is, with, so with plaster of Paris or whatever whatever you want to use, whatever medium, I think when plaster of Paris, a lot of them, there's like a catalytic response, and that's what gets it to harden. Is there heat involved?
Well, yeah, with plaster it heats up, so you can't use that in snow. Plus, it's liquid. I mean, it would never. It's you mix it with water, it wouldn't harden up right. I mean, you'd have a mess. So you have to have something that doesn't interact, with the snow and temperature-wise, and so plaster wouldn't work.
Okay. Anyway, it's a great question.
Is there a type of soil or ground cover that is more conducive to reproducing dermal ridges in the tract than other? Because I would think in leaves and things like that, you're not going to pick up the dermal ridges in a plaster cast.
Typically you don't. I mean, and I've got, like I said, I've got a lot of footprint casts that go all the way back to 1958 in my office here. And there are people out there who say, oh yes, there are dermal ridges on this track or that one. And to be honest with you, I don't see it. Mostly what you see are the material that's on the ground, pine needles and the dirt. A track would have to be done in some kind of a medium like, moist clay, or silt or something like that, where you get a really pristine impression, and it's kind of irrelevant anyway. I mean, most primates have dermal ridges anyhow, so whether they're there or not, it depends on the material it's in, and even if it is or it isn't, it's kind of irrelevant.
Well, I would think that would be the smoking gun of prints. If you have a dermal ridge or dermal ridges, it's almost conclusive, as opposed to something that would be looked at with a jaundiced eye from the standpoint of being faked.
Well,
Are there other, let me rephrase that. If you're looking at a cast and you don't see a dermal ridge, are there other things in the cast that you look for to verify authenticity?
Yeah, there are a couple of big ones, actually. You have to look at if you see, you're not just going to see one track. I mean, I know people say they find just one track. I've never seen just one track. You always find multiples. You find the line of prints. And, the way those tracks, the spacing between the footprints, the shape of the track. There's also, professional trackers that have been able to tell the difference between real tracks and fake tracks, because in a real track, as that foot rolls through the material, there are going to be pressure cracks on the inside of the boundary of the foot outline. On a fake track, the pressure cracks are on the outside because that's where the object was wiggled into the dirt. So those are kind of big ones.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick. When we talk about trackers, the two gentlemen that I was with a couple of weeks ago, both of them have professional training, military training in tracking. And it's really a pleasure to watch somebody, if there's one thing in this world that I really appreciate, it's excellence. Not perfection, but excellence. And these guys were excellent at it's just really fun to watch them analyze the tiniest little bits of evidence, snap twigs and that sort of thing, look at it from all different directions and figure out and interpret that evidence. It's really interesting.
Will, have any dens or structures been found where it was obvious that was an abode of a Sasquatch? Bones, animal skulls, perhaps clothing?
No.
Do you know of any instance when that has occurred?
No. And I'm not going to say it here because it's something I'm saving for later, but that's not the places they inhabit. And I'll just leave it at that. I actually have photographs of what they do, so I'm going to leave it right there. And fellas,
well, let's take that step.
Well,
of the areas that they.
Let's bring that up on another episode. We're out of time, guys. Let's go around the table. Any final thoughts before we close out?
No, I don't have anything.
Thank you, Judge, for all the questions and everything, and also Tom and Will. So great job.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank the judge. I really appreciate your analysis. You have a very professionally trained, critical mind, I guess, a way of analyzing the evidence. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That's most kind.
All right, fellas, listen. We really appreciate the chat. Great to have you on, Judge, as always. And we will pick that line of thinking up on the next one we do, okay?
Very good.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned to the third segment.
Welcome. These 8 stories are a collection being brought to you by Williem Jevning and are being narrated by me, Jim Sower. Story 1. Sasquatch Story. Sonoma County, California. Sonoma County, California. Just a story. Terrifying screams heard. No sighting. July 1980. Well, I have collected enough information from various Bigfoot sites about screams to conclude that I heard a Sasquatch on a bicycle touring trip from Portland, Oregon to Santa Barbara, California in the summer of 1980. My girlfriend and I arrived at Fort Ross Historical Park north of Jenner, California, in Sonoma County on an evening in mid-July. We decided to camp there at Fort Ross as it was marked as a campsite on our map, but it had no campsites. There was no one at the main house nor around the fort, Old Russian Fur Trading Fort, or on any part of the grounds. We rode to a campground further south, but it was too expensive. We decided to ride back to Fort Ross. We camped to the left of the upper parking lot under some Monterey pines next to a picnic bench. We ate dinner and went to bed at around 9 p.m. At approximately 1 a.m., a scream 20 feet to the left of the tent, our heads were facing the ocean, a blood-curdling scream of various sounds in succession that lasted at least 9 seconds. It frightened me to my bone marrow. I froze in fear, knowing that whatever made the sound was huge. It was so close, I could hear the tremor in its throat. Since I'm a musician, I realize how much force it takes to make a sound that loud. I've also been camping all my life, and have heard various animals, but this was different. I have been told it was a bear or a mountain lion, but I don't think so. Anyway, my girlfriend said in a whisper, "What the frick was that?" I started to reach for a flashlight, and her hand grabbed my wrist with a vice-like pressure so I didn't move. We remained frozen, listening to every little noise for an hour. Incidentally, there were sheep running free everywhere going "Bah! Bah!" and they didn't stop making noise when the scream occurred. Finally, my girlfriend fell asleep, and I remained on guard with my hands hovering around the tent pole to use as a weapon, thinking that at any moment it would stick its fanged head into our tent. At around 2:30 a.m., I guess, I heard another scream down by the fort in the lower parking area. I figured it wasn't coming back, so I fell asleep. It didn't occur to me the next morning that it was a Sasquatch, so I didn't look for footprints, nor did I hear it walking the night before. This is the end of Story 1. Story number 2. A story from Tehama County, California. Summer 1977, 12 o'clock a.m. No sighting, just an odd occurrence. Nearest town, Chester, Highway 36 at Lost Creek Road. Willow Springs Campground in the Mount Lassen National Forest. Directions, take Highway 36 out of Red Bluff, then Wilson Lake Road to first right. The road number is 29 North 18. It leads right into Willow Springs Campground, Lassen National Forest at 530-595-4444. My grandpa, my uncle, and I have been working in the area picking up sugar pine and digger pine cones for about 3 days or so, and had planned on being there for around a week. We were camped in a lower campsite in this campground, just off the main cinder road coming by the camping area. I remember the camp was right next to a creek, and each night we would hear the deer coming down to the creek to water, and would occasionally shine our flashlights and see them drinking. One particular night, we were sitting around relaxing, and I commented that it was strange that we didn't hear any deer in the creek. In fact, I don't recall even hearing any crickets or any of the usual nighttime noises. There was a group of people camped above us about 100 yards or so up the hill, and they hadn't been there camping as long as we had. The 3 of us could hear the people in the camp talking and such. Then it was quiet. Suddenly, someone in the upper camp shouted, "Hey!" Then some loud talking, and then this growl, scream noise. It was very loud and sounded as if it came from a fairly large animal. My uncle and I looked at each other, asking each other what the heck that noise was. And we looked at my grandpa, who was smiling and chuckling, which I found to be very odd unless it was to cover up being frightened himself. My grandpa was a retired logger from Oregon. My uncle had also spent considerable time in the woods, working as well as hunting most of his life. I had spent a lot of time in the woods, also hunting and working for my uncle, but had never heard a sound like that. Nor had the rest of us. My grandpa said he thought it was probably a bobcat or cougar, but my uncle and I had never heard any animal make that kind of sound, not to mention the fact that those animals will most likely stay away from a loud camp and may venture closer when it is dark and quiet. Anyway, while we were wondering what the first noise was, there began a lot of hollering and another loud growl scream from the upper camp. vehicle doors slamming, and then the vehicle took off down the road, tires throwing cinders. They were out of there but fast. We, my uncle and I, were shaken up, but too proud to admit it to my grandpa. We didn't hear anything else from the upper camp. Nothing. I don't know if they left anything up there, or how they were camped or anything. I do know that they didn't come back. We went to bed as it was getting late, and I was so afraid to make any sound, fearful that it would hear me breathing and come into camp to investigate. We left a couple of days later, but I don't recall hearing a deer in the creek in the evenings after that night. All of the information given here is to the best of my recollection. As for the terrain, it was heavily wooded pine forest, quite a bit of brush around the creek area. That's the end of story number 2. Story number 3. Weaverville, Trinity County, California. A young grocery clerk in Weaverville, Trinity County, took me to a point at which he came upon a light-colored Sasquatch during the winter of 1994. It was not far from Big Bar Ranger Station, where he and his girlfriend used to park and neck after work. Engaged in some heavy petting, they were interrupted by the rocking motion of his Chevy Camaro. They looked around, thinking it was one of their friends or other kids screwing around with them, but the windows were pretty fogged up. There was little visibility. Determined to confront the intruder, the young fellow bounced out of the Camaro, screaming, "Knock it off!" in a most assertive tone, only to find himself face to face in the pitch dark with a hulking figure he described as a bit taller than he was. Stunned, the kid backed up into the open car door, unable to move. He said the Bigfoot, with his left fist, wailed on the roof of his Camaro, beating it at least 3 times, but barely denting it. I heard it breathing. Man, I'm telling you, it was alive. Scary, blankety blank. I heard it breathe. The informant called to his girlfriend inside the car, in what she later described as 3 octaves higher than his usual voice, telling her to lay on the horn. Upon hearing the sound of the horn, the Sasquatch sidestepped, backing away from the car, and stared at the kid. I couldn't see his eyes or facial features, but it was clear he was facing me and looking at me. Even as dark as it was, he was only lit up by the car door light. The terrified kid said he got in the car, locked the doors, started the engine, and did a quick U-turn on Big Bar Dump Road. Amazingly, he said the Sasquatch followed them up the road where it turns onto Corral Bottom Road, keeping pace with the car for several hundred feet before trailing off where they could no longer see it. I spoke with the 2 informants at J.C. Cafe in Junction City for more than 2 hours. Their account never wavered, and they still showed great fear in recalling the event. The female witness never actually saw the creature, but said she heard its raspy breathing. It was evidently too dark to get much of a description other than what he could see of the creature, illuminated by the Camaro door's light. He knew right away what he was looking at, but in the shock of the moment, he was able to distinguish little. Responding to my question, "Did you see a reflection from its eyes in the car light?" he replied there was no color or light emitted from its eyes. There was no smell from the creature, and he could not tell if it was male or female, only that it was this humongous, dark, towering image that he could hear breathing quite heavily and with angry intensity. He said it kept pace with his Camaro to about 20 miles an hour. Then it trailed off, but he wasn't sure of his speed. His girlfriend, amazed by it all, only saw a blurred image through the foggy windows. A happy ending to this story, though. The amorous couple are now married and expecting twins. This is the ending of story number 3. Story number 4. Late at Night, Canada. In June 1996, Chief Editor of Animal Watch, Alex Michael, wrote of her encounter with Sasquatch in Volume Number 1, Issue Number 10. I thought to copy the article here as I found it one of the more chilling accounts I have read, and educational as well. Late at Night by Alex Michael. A true story. My family has always been notorious for doing things at odd hours, and as you may well know, the strangest things always happen late at night. It was an unusually warm autumn some years ago, and at 16 years of age I had just finished a summer job as an arts and crafts camp counselor. The only thing left to do was pick up a rather large trunk filled with my belongings. Unable to fit such a large trunk inside the VW Beetle I had purchased just a few weeks before, my mother was volunteered to transport it from the mountains back to the city in the larger of the family cars. Summer camp was a very wild place for me, with staff partying every night until the wee hours of the morning. My room was near the entrance of the staff residence where all these parties took place. By late July, sleep-deprived party wimps like myself were weeded out, so I built a single mattress-sized platform in the woods and then covered it with polyplastic. Bow Valley Provincial Park, an undisturbed protected forest, was only a stone's throw away. It is there that my mother, a small dog named Willow, and myself were going to retrieve my trunk at 3 o'clock on a Monday morning. Why 3 in the morning? Well, I could say it was the heat, but it was mostly because my father had not yet been told that the car would be leaving town. There was also my adolescent fear that knowledge of the platform construction would somehow reflect itself in a summer paycheck I had not yet received. My mother had to be at work by 6:30, so we had less than an hour to complete this covert action. As we approached the highway turnoff, a sliver of the moon cast a glowing border around southwestern Alberta's Mount Yamnuska. Driving several miles along the gravel road, the camp looked deserted. Summer staff had cleared out several weeks before, and a handful of permanent staff were either taking days off in the city or asleep in cabins several miles from the summer campsite. Angling off on the side of the road, my mother left the headlights on, pointing into the trees. There was some discussion about taking the 20-pound dog named Willow for protection. However, Willow's track record for wandering off severely threatened a successful completion of the mission. Plus, very uncharacteristically, the dog named Willow now refused to get out of the car and was partially hidden under the driver's seat. Car headlights were of no value after the first few seconds of meandering through the forest. We had a flashlight, but I was having difficulty remembering the exact location. The 15-minute walk turned into a 30-minute skin-scraping bushwhack, but finally we arrived at the isolated platform, even though the flashlight batteries were now dead. I assured my mother all that needed to be done was to take down the polyplastic rain cover and carry back a mattress and the trunk. It should only take 2 trips. She was noticeably silent as we began working in the darkness. My mother began untying strings securing the poly to the ground, and I was kneeling on top of the 4-foot-high platform, stretching up to reach some tangled binder twine knots tied to a tree. A pungent smell suddenly flooded the air. My eyes moved from the knots to the tall length of plastic. There, distorted through the semi-transparent poly, was a huge shadow only about 7 feet away. With the 4-foot platform and me kneeling on top, the creature was easily at eye level. A split second later, there was an incredibly loud screaming roar. Although I know of nothing to describe it, the sound was like a peacock scream, a bear growl, and a lion's roar, all somehow combined. I can't tell you if I screamed. I can't tell you much of anything other than my eyes continued to peer through the plastic at this massive shadow. My 5'3" tall mother had somehow leaped into the air and was now up on the platform beside me. Whatever it was finally turned and walked slowly away on its long behind feet. We continued watching as each heavy step could be heard contacting the ground. There were no visible ears, just a sparse mohawk-like fringe sprouting up from the tapering top of the creature's head. From behind, the upper body appeared massive. It continued to walk upright until disappearing into the trees. We stayed on top of the platform, motionless, for some time after. Then, finally, I started ripping down the plastic. I have no idea what my mother did during the next 40 or 50 seconds, but my next memory was power walking through the forest, balancing a single mattress on top of my head with one hand and carrying the handle of the trunk in the other. I assumed my mother was holding up the other end of the trunk. With Willow still hidden under the driver's seat, it was a very quiet drive home. Late at night, they say that your mind can play tricks on you, but I am so certain. Brown bears had been in the area that summer, but I have never seen a bear walk upright that smoothly for that long a time. Or could it have been a very large, long-furred man standing over 7 feet in height? I say man because intuition tells me that the creature was a male. Could it have been a Sasquatch that night? I will never really know for sure, but you can bet that I will keep telling the story, as if it were. This is the end of story number 4. Story number 5. Logan Lake, British Columbia, Canada. Nearest big city, Kamloops. The informants, a man and his wife, were not too far from me, camping in the summer of 2000, and during their stay they were experiencing some rather frightful events. The reason they contacted me was because they had come across my sighting, and because theirs happened so close they wanted to talk to me. They were camping for 2 weeks, and during this time their food was being taken, and even some clothes were missing. They thought maybe coyotes or even bears, but one morning after hearing something in the campsite during the night, they woke up to find everything tossed around the campsite. Even the guy's boat on a trailer was moved a few feet. One night in particular, something hit the side window and broke it, and in the morning they found a large rock sitting there in the dirt. On another night, they said it sounded like a few people were outside their camper mumbling. Jill said it was like someone had their mouth full of food. I pictured the Sasquatches eating all their food and trying to talk to each other. After that morning incident, they cleaned up and had breakfast, when Jill had noticed bare footprints just off to the side of their camper, and they said it was obvious to them by the size of the prints that the visitor during the night had to be a Sasquatch, nothing else. They said the prints were around 18 inches long. The man put his size 12 foot inside the print, and there were still 5 or so inches more in length. They told me that a couple days later they were out in the boat fishing and actually saw this thing in their campsite while they were out in the boat. Apparently it was throwing their stuff around and making a mess of things. The couple described the Sasquatch as a reddish-brown with long arms and a funny-shaped head. They believed it to be a male because of its bulk, size, and height, which they say was about 7 to 8 feet tall. I asked if it could have been a bear, and they both replied, "As God is our witness, what we saw was a Sasquatch." After describing the arms, legs, head, and all, there was nothing else it could have been. Personally, judging by their body language and the way they were trembling while talking to me, I believe them 100%, no doubt whatsoever. The older couple said they waited in the boat for a while until they were certain it was gone, and as fast as they could, they chucked everything in the camper and left the area, only packing up properly when they got to the town where they ended up staying that night. The couple were in their 60s, very clean and neat and polite. I can't see these two spinning a tale because it's been almost 6 years since that time, and they preferred not to be bothered by it. The sighting area is no more than a 40-minute car ride from me, and it's exciting because I've actually heard of another sighting in that area, but I didn't pay much attention to the person at the time, but now I'm going to try and track him down to hear what he has to say. I'm wondering if maybe there is a Sasquatch, and it could still be in that area. Tim Martindale, Merritt, British Columbia. This is the end of story number 5. Story number 6. Teapot Hill Hiking Trail in Cultus Lake Provincial Park. My name is Sanel Hodzik, and today, December 12, 2012, at approximately 3 p.m., I was hiking with my dog up Teapot Hill Hiking Trail near Cultus Lake Provincial Park in the Fraser River Valley. The nearest town would be toward Chilliwack, British Columbia, Canada. On my way down the trail, I was changing my music on my iPhone, not really paying attention to my surroundings, when I noticed that my dog, Lila, was barking like crazy. She was about 5 feet ahead of me and staring off into the distance, so I stopped and looked ahead when I noticed something in the bushes about 50 feet ahead of me. I was so scared that I froze and just kept staring at it. After about a 10-second stare down, I switched my camera on and quickly took a picture. Meanwhile, my dog is still barking like crazy. I then picked up a rock and threw it in the direction of the thing, and then I quickly turned around and ran back up the hill. I waited about until I saw someone else coming down the hill, and I followed him closely behind all the way down. So I do believe I saw the Sasquatch or Bigfoot that day. If I could describe it, I would say he was about 8 to 9 feet tall, very hairy and big. His skin color was brownish. His face was something like a monkey or ape. I took it with a full zoom on my iPhone 4. He was about 50 yards away from me. He's in the middle rightish of the picture. Only thing I noticed really was how he was standing, looking at me. It had a long face, but bigger forehead with long hair starting from about the top of its head. Sanel Hodzik, Chilliwack, British Columbia. That is the end of story number 6. Story number 7. Letter from El Paso County, Colorado Springs, Colorado. Summer, 1991. To whom it may concern. After reading some of your stories regarding Bigfoot, I thought I would add something I have kept rather a secret for quite some years. I was a cadet at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, back in the summer of 1991. I had been at the academy for only a few weeks and was finishing up basic training when it happened. Now, the academy itself sits on the foothills of the Colorado Rocky Mountains. Basically, I could step out of the cadet area and I would be standing in the mountains. There's plenty of brush, trees, and so on to conceal just about anyone of anything you want back there. Anyhow, one night, about 9 p.m., my roommate and I were laying in bed chatting about our upcoming campout in Jack's Valley, an area just beside the academy where we did a lot of field training, when we heard what sounded like a woman screaming her head off. It was absolutely horrific to hear. What was most interesting was that prior to the blood-curdling noise, we could hear the other cadets in their rooms talking and joking. The campus was basically shut down for the night, and everyone was getting ready for the next day. I remember the ambient noise being rather loud. Then this scream came. All of a sudden you could have heard a pin drop, it was so quiet. I turned and asked my roommate if he heard what I and everyone else had just heard. I know, what a dumb question. He looks at me and says, "Oh yeah, that's the local Bigfoot." I couldn't believe it, but of course, I heard it. He then proceeds to tell me about a buddy of his who saw a big hairy human drinking at a local lake. When it saw his friend watching it, it stood up, turned away, and walked into the forest. Of course, the next week in Jack's Valley, for me, was a very nervous affair. I was more worried about getting up at night and walking to the latrine by myself than I was running the assault course. Well, I just thought I'd add my 2 cents worth. Please withhold printing my name from this email if you decide to post it. Thank you. That's the end of story number 7. Story number 8. Lake Christie, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. My story. I don't even know where to begin. To this day, even the thought of what I am about to tell you makes every hair on my body stand up and brings tears to my eyes. Why the tears? I don't know, but they are genuine. I have never discussed this with anyone, and hadn't planned to, but after stumbling across your site, I think I've had a change of heart. I live in Ontario, Canada. It is probably for this reason that I have never said anything until now. To my knowledge, almost all Sasquatch sightings are along the west coast on the continent and along the Rocky Mountains. I don't know how many sightings have been recorded this far east, but I know what I saw and heard on a few separate occasions. I used to work at a scout camp in northeastern Ontario. It is in a very remote location, nearly an hour's drive from any civilization, and one of the only true scout camps in all of Canada. It is surrounded by lakes and large hills of dense forest on all sides, and there are a few cottages scattered here and there around the main lake and camp that it's stationed on. Lake Christie, if I remember correctly. Although I live far away from this place, I worked there every summer from 1996 to 1999. My first experience happened in 1996. I was 16 years old. As a counselor, every 2 weeks we were moved around and put in charge of different Scout and Cub Scout groups. I guess so everyone gets a chance to work with groups of all ages. On this particular rotation, I was working with one of the senior scout groups at the camp. As part of their last week there, they had to partake in what was called a solo night. This is where each camper is driven by one of the assistant camp directors to a remote location and left for the night with the bare necessities to survive, a sleeping bag, rations for 1 day, and 2 strike-anywhere matches. It was on this particular night that I will never forget the sounds that I heard. It was late at night in August. I'm not exactly certain of the time, and I was sleeping in my tent in the upper field, which is not exactly on the upper campgrounds, but up the dirt road quite a ways and into the bush another 5 minutes walk. Altogether, probably a 20-minute walk from the main campground. In the middle of my slumber, I was suddenly awakened by a loud, deep shrieking, squealing sound that I had never heard before. I sat up in my tent, alarmed and uncertain of what I had heard. I thought maybe it was one of my colleagues playing a trick on me and the other 2 counselors who were camped up there alone for the night, or one of the other 2 for that matter. This being a camp full of staff who are well known for their pranks, I wouldn't have put it past them. Then I heard the noise again. It was even louder. At first I thought it was a skunk being attacked by coyotes or something. I have heard that sound before and witnessed it. For those who don't know, skunks actually make a sort of shrieking, squealing sound when being mauled to death. I saw it firsthand, but that is another story altogether. Editor's note. All Mustelidae, such as wolverines, weasels, badgers, civet cats, skunks, and otters, etc., emit a loud to groaning squeal or high-rolling shriek, often sounding like a woman in hopeless distress when caught by predators or in iron-set traps. The sound can be very loud and unnerving, even from a wounded rabbit. However, this sound was much deeper. Then, just as it had come, the sound stopped. I lay awake for the rest of the night, barely moving a muscle. When morning came, and the sun was bright enough, I slowly came out of my tent and walked to the main campground for breakfast. A few minutes later, the other 2 counselors came down to the main camp and gave me a mysterious glance. Then one of them approached and asked me, "Was that you making all that racket last night? You scared poor Dave half to death." I just looked at him and said, "What racket?" with a stone-cold look. He gave me a knowing look and walked away. We never discussed it after that, and no one mentioned pulling a prank on me or the other two that night. Sooner or later, everyone owned up to their pranks, but no one even mentioned this one at all. It was not until months later that I realized what I may have heard. I was watching a documentary on TV about Bigfoot, and a crew hunting the evasive being had recorded what they thought were mating calls of the mysterious creature. When I heard the sounds of the recording come from the TV, the memories of that night came back to me. I quickly sat up, eyes glued to the screen, and the hairs on my neck stood up again. It sounded almost identical. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Again. My next encounter was 2 years later, 1998, in August again. It was late August, and there were no more cubs for the remainder of the summer, so the designated cub field and its cabins were vacant. So, not having much to do and no kids to watch, I decided to sleep in the cub field with the rest of the staff who had no children to take care of. The cub field is exactly that. It is a large clearing in the middle of dense forest, up yet another hill. It is probably 150 yards wide and probably 200 to 250 yards long, with a row of small cabins on either side. While I laid in bed in one of the cabins, I woke a little after 12 o'clock a.m. I don't know why, but I was just suddenly awake. In the distance, I heard what I thought was howling, but I wasn't exactly sure. It sounded kind of muffled, but I was used to that sort of thing. I looked over at one of the other counselors staying in my cabin that night, and he was fast asleep. Then, out of nowhere, I heard what I thought was someone running right by my cabin. The steps were heavy and quick. I shot out of bed, grabbing my flashlight, wondering who was running around at this hour, since everyone was supposed to be in bed hours ago. I swung the door of the cabin open and shone my flashlight in the field. I couldn't believe what I saw next. About 40 feet away, diagonally from me, I saw a large, hairy creature walking across the field very swiftly. I stood there in shock, wondering what my eyes were seeing. This thing was absolutely enormous. At first I thought it might be a bear, but then realized something. It was walking upright, on 2 legs. It was very tall, bulky, and had dark brown hair covering its entire body. Then, as if noticing my flashlight, it stopped, turned, and looked at me. I could see the yellow reflection of its eyes and its face. The face seemed to be almost half human, half ape-like, having little hair on its face, but the skin was almost the same color as its hair, a sort of light brownish color. It stood there, looking at me, and I at it, for what seemed like an eternity, but was probably more like a few seconds. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake up the others, but I was frozen. I was caught up in the phenomenon that I was seeing and couldn't move. That's when I noticed the smell. It was such a rancid odor, I had to plug my nose to save from puking. Then the creature turned and began to continue its swift movement across the field, and in a matter of seconds, it was across the field, walked between 2 cabins, and into the dense forest. It was when it walked between the 2 cabins that I realized how tall this being was. I am 6 foot tall. Without standing on my tiptoes, I can reach approximately to the 7 foot 4 inch mark. This thing, as it walked between the 2 cabins, was taller than where the top one of the doors is. The cabins are elevated off the ground. From standing on the ground, I cannot touch the top of one of the doors. I am a couple of inches shy of it. I checked the next day. I would estimate that this thing was probably around 8 feet tall, or close to it. Again, I lay awake for the remainder of the night, my hatchet by my side. This was the scenario for many of the remaining nights of that summer before I went home. There were even sleepless nights afterwards while at home. I didn't think I was afraid of anything until that night. I tried searching for tracks the next day, but to no avail. I couldn't find anything. The next day I asked one of the head counselors if there were any large animals in the general area, such as bears, and he said, no. Apparently, there were no bears for miles and miles. I never mentioned anything about what I saw that night. I didn't want anyone to think that I was crazy. I thought I would just wait and see if anyone else mentioned something before I said anything. No one did. My last encounter was the following and my final year, yet again in August. I don't know why I went back after all of the nightmares and sleepless nights from the previous summer. I guess I thought it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. This time, I had taken a rowboat out onto the lake with a lady friend whom I had met that summer. Yes, there are female staff at scout camps. The main beach for the camp is in a small inlet of the lake, almost like a sort of small bay, before it opens up. As I was taking her on our romantic moonlight row, I heard what I thought was somebody whistling at me. I stopped rowing. She didn't hear it, but I know I did. I looked around at the surrounding shoreline and didn't see anything. Next, I heard a splash, a little one, as if someone had thrown a rock into the water. I thought maybe another couple was somewhere along that shore. I grabbed my flashlight. She grabbed hers. We scanned the shore from the safety of our boat to see if we could spot them. We were scanning in different sections. Then I saw them. Those eyes. The yellow reflection. I focused in on them, and they had an eerie resemblance to the ones I had seen the year before. "Do you see them?" I heard her ask. Without looking away, I said, "No. You?" "No," she replied. "What is that?" referring to the eyes caught in my light. "A deer?" she asked. "Yeah, probably," I said. But I knew better. Then the eyes were gone. We then agreed that there was probably another couple out there, and we didn't want to get busy in front of other people. So I turned the boat around, and we went back to the camp. I have kept these secrets with me for 5+ years now. This is one thing I can honestly say I haven't told a single soul until now. I will never forget what I've seen and heard. Although there was no physical contact, I have been extremely traumatized from what I've experienced. All this has been put in the back of my mind until now, probably because there was a show on this Discovery Channel about Sasquatch today. Like I said before, it still makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. This is the end of the 8 stories. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out